right, today we are diving into the residential listing agreement. Tomorrow there is no class due to the Realty One Group team meeting or office meeting that will be in the office tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we come back at 4 o'clock and we'll be covering kind of some of the free tools that you have at your disposal, some of the things that I use on a regular basis in my transactions to help make things a little easier, a little bit more organized, and who doesn't like free? So we'll be covering those on Thursday at 4. As always, if you have any questions, I do try to keep an eye on the chat box. So I do have that open and ready to go, as well as you can just feel free to unmute yourself and be like, Amy, I've got a question. Totally okay to interrupt me. Don't let me get too far down the road before you get your question answered. Residential listing agreement, we're going to dive into CAR forms. In case you don't know how to get there, you're going to go to car.org. Then you go to transactions, and then you got to log in if you haven't logged in already, and then click the yellow button, which is going to open up ultimately a new window. So if you're having problems getting in, it could be that you have your pop-up blocker on, so it could be blocking it. I come in, mine's set up to default me to the dashboard. And if I were creating a new listing to do that listing agreement, I just come in here and hit new. I'm going to hit new listing because that's what I'm creating today. If you have your template set up, it can apply your templates to it, and then you would put in the name or the property address of the file. You can decide how you want to set up your zip forms. I usually list my listings as the address and my purchases as the last name of the buyers and then purchase. So this would be like 123 Sample Street. And that's what I would leave it as. And then you could put in the property address. Sample Street, Vacaville, 95688. You can go, I think the Zip Forms Record Connect is an additional fee. So I usually don't use that. If it was a purchase, you could pull the information over from the MLS, but we're doing a listing. You're going to select the category for your listing. So is it residential, industrial, multi-unit, condo, commercial, vacant land, co-op, manufactured, farm and ranch? So take your pick. For the most part, your transactions are going to be residential. That's going to be 1 to 4 units. That would be single family homes. If it was a condo, you would go with condominium. If it had multi-units, even if it was up to that 2 to 4, like duplex, triplex, quadplex, you would go multi-unit. And then obviously you can go farm and ranch and manufactured. Why are they all separate? Because you can set up different templates for each one. That's really what it comes down to. It's not necessarily that it's going to treat your transaction any differently. It just allows it to categorize it as far as if you've got it set up to auto apply transactions or templates to it. If you have your templates, you can select it in there. So I've got lots of different things set up in there. We're just going to bypass that and hit save. Now it's going to create that file for me and it's going to open it up. From there, what I like to do first, I know we already went through the Zip Forms tutorial, but I would go into parties and I would add my sellers in here. Okay, so I'd go seller 1. I would put in the seller's first name, seller, and their last name, which is 1, and their email address, seller1@test.com. That's all I'm worried about. Again, I'm not using this as a CRM. I'm not using this as a tracker or for compliance purposes. I'm really just using this for forms and to get those e-signatures out. So I would add the sellers. If I want 2 sellers, I can click on seller 2 and go, this seller's first name is seller and their last name is 2 and their email is seller2@test.com. Right. All right. And we're going to hit save. That adds your people to the transaction. So once I finish my listing agreement, you could shoot it out for signatures and their information, legal name, and their email address is already in the file. Next, I just scoot on over to documents. And here's where I'm going to add that listing agreement. So I'm just going to click on the blue all buttons, all forms button on the right-hand side of the page. And you can search things either from the acronym, so like a listing agreement, be RLA, or I could have searched listing or agreement, so any part of the name. There is the residential listing agreement exclusive right there. There is the res.listing agreement -exclusive. Those are the same things, just for the record, they're the same form. They have them in there both ways. So take your pick which one you want. You really don't want the seller reserved or the open. We just avoid those altogether. I'm not even going to cover those because it's limited as far as when you get paid. So we like the residential listing agreement exclusive. Again, anytime I open up forms for editing, so I just double clicked on it so I can edit that form. I use it in the new form editor versus the form editor classic because it allows me to edit multiple forms at the same time instead of opening one, closing out, opening the next one. So I like this editor much nicer. When I open that, it is going to add that in. Now keep in mind that there's documents attached to the listing agreement. So you're like, Amy, we pulled up the RLA. I know there's like 20 other documents. Those documents do need to get included every time you send out that RLA. The first one is the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. This just confirms the different types of ways somebody can be represented in a transaction. This doesn't commit you to anything. It doesn't commit you to representing them. It just says, hey, you can either be represented by an agent as the seller's agent. You could have an agent represent you as a buyer with a buyer's agent, or somebody could represent both the buyer and the seller. And then it outlines the seller and buyer responsibilities. For this one, you just click the boxes for sellers. The seller's name should already be in there because we already inputted them into our transaction. And then your brokerage firm should go there. You're going to put the DRE license number here. Nope, I don't think it's that one. I think it's this one. There we go. Oh, it didn't select it for me. Anyways, put in your DRE license there, the brokerage, and then you're going to put in yours here. Okay, once you put them in there once, they're going to auto-populate on any other forms you add to this transaction. The second page of that agency disclosure or the AD form is just the legal jargon that accompanies it. The next one is the Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory, just advising any of our clients or potential clients that there is to be no discrimination inside of real estate transactions, that there are lots of protected classes, including race, color, ancestry, national origin, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, marital status, familial status, right? Families with kids, citizenship, immigration status, primary language, military or veteran status, source of income, medical condition, disability, whether it's mental or physical, genetic information, criminal history, and those are for non-relevant convictions and any arbitrary characteristics. So please just don't discriminate. This just alerts them that we're not allowed to, tells them who is supposed to comply with those fair housing laws, gives them examples of what discrimination might look like in case they aren't sure what discrimination is, examples of positive practices, and then some resources in case they feel discriminated against. Your sellers are going to sign that form as well. The next one is your possible representation of more than one buyer or seller disclosure and consent. This just lists that, hey, at any time we might be representing more than one buyer or more than one seller at any given time. Or we might also be representing in a dual agency capacity, at which point we will let you know as soon as that comes to pass. If we're working with multiple sellers, we don't push buyers or sellers to, we don't give one listing more promotion than the other listing. And the same thing with buyers. We don't push buyers towards one of our listings versus the others. It's all equal opportunity inside of our brokerage. And then it also alerts them that buyers are advised that the seller or listing agent may disclose the existence and terms and conditions of buyer's offer unless other parties and their agent have all signed a written confidentiality agreement, right? Offers are not necessarily confidential. Everybody signs that they acknowledge and have read this form, including the sellers and yourself. Okay. The last form that we encounter on the beginning of the residential listing agreement is our wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. This is just a good time to remind your clients that at any time somebody tells them they should be wiring funds, they should confirm with you to make sure that that is a legit source, and then also confirm with the person that sent that information or with the actual company where they're trying to send those funds. So if they get wire instructions from the title company, they should call the title company and verify those instructions before sending those funds on their way. We usually don't have a problem with that with sellers because they usually are not wiring funds very far. They just get funds wired to them at the close of escrow. Any questions about those forms that are attached to the beginning of the listing agreement? Nope. Everybody's good. Fabulous. All right. Let's carry on then to our listing agreement. Don't worry, there's more fluff forms at the end of the listing agreement. All right, the residential listing agreement starts on page 7 of the residential listing agreement package. You are going to put the date that you prepared it in the upper left-hand corner. You can just double click, it will populate today's date in there, or you can select and then select a date. Keep in mind that this date is anytime we go back and reference the listing agreement, like on a modification of terms, and it asks for the listing agreement and date prepared, you're talking about this date here, not the date that it was signed. Okay. In the beginning, top line, you're going to put the seller's information. That would be your seller's names. Again, if you already set it up inside of participants, then they're going to magically show up there. And then you are going to show up here, this brokerage, because we'd already inputted that into the transaction on that first form, the agency disclosure. Right, so it's exclusive right to sell, seller 1 and 2. Those are sellers, hereby employees and grants Realty One Fox Group, or Realty One Group Fox, the broker, beginning on date. For your listing to be valid, it must have a beginning date and an end date, right? A beginning and an expiration. You could say today's date. That's usually a good place to start. And then you can decide how you want to end these. Some people have where all their listing agreements either expire at like June 30th or December 30th. Others do them for 3 months, some do them for 6 months. So it's all in how you want to run your business and what the current market is, as well as when this property is actually going to go on the market. Just because we're beginning this listing agreement today doesn't mean that property is going to hit the market today. It may be a month or two down the road before the property actually goes live on the market. So just for kicks, we're going to say this is going to end on December 30th. Okay, the listing period. The exclusive and irrevocable right to sell or exchange the real property described as, this is where we're going to put the information for the property. You're going to make sure to put the street address, right? And please make sure to put street, court, drive, way, whatever it might be there on the end, because it's not uncommon to have lots of addresses with that are 123 Sample Street and the 123 Sample Court. So please make sure to put the complete address there. Make sure to fill in the county here. And then your zip code and your parcel number. If you're not sure where to track down your parcel number, the MLS is a good place to start. You'll be like, Amy, but it's not on the market yet. I know, but usually most of our properties that go for sale have been listed previously. So you can go in the MLS, search that property up, put in that parcel number, and away you go. If you can't find it in the MLS, then you can look up tax records, either through the county for which you're getting ready to do the listing, or through, if you have access to the title company's website, you can access it through that to pull up that APN number or the parcel number. If it's a manufactured home, you're going to use this checkbox here for the property is a manufactured or mobile home. So that goes for both manufactured or mobile, whether it's on real property, like you're actually buying the or selling the land with it, or whether it's in a park where you rent the land. Either way, this button gets checked if you have a mobile or a manufactured home. If the property is being sold as part of a probate, conservatorship, guardianship, receivership, you're going to check this box here, and it's going to attach the probate listing advisory attached to that. So that's what those two boxes identify. If it's just a regular sale, you can just move on past those two boxes. The next thing that we're going to put in place is the listing price and terms. If you are preparing this document in advance of your listing appointment, you can fill in all the pertinent information that you are able to ahead of time. You may want to leave this section blank and then fill it out when you're sitting there with the sellers if you haven't decided on a purchase price yet. If most your document is printed, like we typed in all this information and then we're going to handwrite information like the listing price, just make sure you have everybody initial where the handwritten portions are, so that differentiates that, hey, this was handwritten, but it wasn't done after everybody signed it. Okay, this should all be completed before people sign it. If we know what the listing price is, we're going to go ahead and plug that in right here. And then it's going to fill this in up here where it writes out the words. And then if there's any additional listing terms, you're going to put this in B. This is oftentimes where I personally put in a little clause right here. If the property is not going on the market right away, I might put something like listing price to be to be evaluated within 10 days of on market date. Right? So if we're putting this listing agreement together 2 months in advance and the market's going to change between now and then, potentially, I always put like, hey, listing price to be reevaluated in 10 minutes, 10 days of on market date, or 2 weeks of on market date, so that the sellers know that, hey, we're putting a number on here, but ultimately we're going to come back and relook at it based on where the market's changing and moving to in a month and a half. Okay. You can save this as a clause. If you go into your templates, you can save clauses in there. So I could save this and then I would just be able to click add clause, and then I could pull up what my personal clauses were. And maybe this one was in here. I could click on it and it would automatically add it to my form. So that's where why when I click on here, it says add clause, you can save those in there. So if this is something I put on every listing agreement, excuse me, I can save it as a clause, or I could set it up in my templates where it automatically puts that information on every listing agreement that gets pulled up in my templates. And then I can either tweak it or delete it if I don't want it. Okay, any questions about section 1 and 2 on the RLA? All right, moving right along. Section 3 is your compensation to the broker. Notice the amount or rate of real estate commissions is not fixed by law. They are not set by each broker. They are set by each broker individually. It may be negotiated between seller and broker. Real estate commissions, including all compensation and fees to broker. Now, keep in mind that please don't go to other brokerages and talk about what commissions you guys charge your sellers. That's actually illegal, okay? Because then it could be construed that we're trying to set up a minimum commission. So what you charge really shouldn't be set with other agencies or talked about with other agencies. You can talk about it with other agents inside our brokerage, totally appropriate, just not outside our brokerage. You're going to check this little box here and put in a percent. So we're going to put in 6% there. So that's your option. You can either seller agrees to pay broker as compensation for services irrespective of agency relationships, either blank 6% of the listing price, or if a purchase agreement is entered into the purchase price, or blank. So this is either or, it's not both. So we're either going to pay a percent or a flat rate here. Okay, so you could put in like, well, I'm going to charge them $10,000 to do this listing. Then it's not the percentage, it's just the flat rate. Or if I check this box, then it's the percentage and not this down here. Okay, so you have to choose either one or the other. Now, let's say that you want to charge 6% and an additional $350 to cover your TC fee or something. Who knows? You could put and $350 transact. You can call it that. Please don't call it an admin fee. That's wrong. You can't charge admin fees. Transaction coordination fee. But you could call it that if you wanted to. So you could charge one and it's something else, or you could do a flat rate and that. Okay. So you can fill in both of those lines. That would be appropriate if you wanted to. As follows, this is how you get compensated. If during the listing period or any extension, broker, cooperating broker, seller, or any other person procures a ready, willing, and able buyer whose offer to purchase the property on any price and terms is accepted by seller, provided the buyers complete the transaction or is prevented from doing so by the seller. Broker is entitled to compensation whether any escrow resulting from such offer closes during or after the expiration of the listing period or any extension. So if I've got a listing agreement that expires on December 30th, we enter into contract on December 5th, and then it closes in January, my listing expires at the end of December. As long as we're still in contract and that contract closes, the listing is still valid. I still get compensated. It's also saying that, hey, if we're in contract and the seller prevents the close of escrow, I'm still due a commission. Okay, if the seller accepted that offer, they said it was acceptable, and then the seller prevents closing, I still get paid. So that's section 1 there. Section 2 is, or if within blank calendar days after the end of the listing period or any extension, or after any cancellation of this agreement, unless otherwise agreed, seller enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer property to anyone, a prospective buyer, or that person's related entity, who physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period or any extension by the broker or cooperating broker, or for whom the broker or any cooperating broker submitted to seller a signed written offer to acquire, lease, exchange, or obtain an option on the property. Seller, however, shall have no obligation to broker under paragraph 3A2 unless no later than the end of the listing period or any extension or cancellation, broker has given seller a written notice of the names of such prospective buyers. So I highly recommend putting a number in here on A2. Usually something like 30, 60, 90 days, maybe 120 days, whatever you're comfortable with. And this just says that, hey, seller, if you cancel this listing agreement and somebody had submitted an offer to you, you can't go around me. You can't cancel this listing agreement and go around me and go negotiate and take that offer and sell the property by cutting me out of the transaction. Okay. Now, the tricky point is that if it's canceled, right, or it expires, this listing agreement, we are supposed to provide the seller with a list of prospective buyers that either saw the property or submitted offers. And most of the time, we don't get the buyers' names if they just see the property. So it might be a good practice that you have the buyer's agents, when they schedule showings on your property, give you the names of the prospective buyers so that you have a record of who saw the property. Okay, just something to keep in mind. Without that list, this 90 days is null and void. It doesn't count. Okay, section 3 is, or if without the broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale, conveyed, leased, rented, or otherwise transferred or made unmarketable by a voluntary act of seller during the listing period or any extension. So if my listing goes through the end of December, my seller doesn't say anything and they just make the property unavailable for sale, I would be due a commission on that because they took the opportunity to sell the property away. Generally speaking, what happens there is the seller contacts you and says, hey, I want to pull the property off the market. We've decided not to sell. And then mutual cancellation would cancel that. Okay. Any questions there on 3A? All right, 3B. If completion of the sale is prevented by a party to the transaction other than the seller, then compensation, which would otherwise have been earned under paragraph 3A, shall be payable only if and when seller collects damages by suit, arbitration, settlement, or otherwise, and then in an amount equal to the lesser of 1/2 of the damages recovered or the above compensation after first deducting title and escrow expenses and the expenses of collection, if any. Okay, so if the buyer prevents the sale of the property, the seller goes after them in a lawsuit, they win damages in the form of compensation, you'd be due to 1/2 of that compensation up to the max of your commission listed on this listing agreement. That's B. C is, in addition, seller agrees to pay broker. I normally don't fill anything in on that line, but you could. I don't know what you would fill in, but you could. Seller has been advised on broker's policy regarding cooperation with and the amount of compensation offered to other brokers. Broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers participating through the MLS by offering to MLS brokers out of broker's compensation specified in 3A, either blank % of the purchase price or a flat rate. So normally we put in a % here. Generally, it's going to be somewhere between 2.5% to 3%. You start going below 2.5%, offering it to the buyer's agent, and sometimes they will steer their clients away from your property. They should not. Please don't ever do that. And they might. Okay, or so you could do a % there, or you could do a flat rate. This is usually the only question about commission I get on these, because people go, okay, you got 6 there and then 2.5 there. So is it 6 plus 2.5? It's really 8.5. And you're like, no, it's just totally 6%. Out of that part of it goes to the other agent. Most of the time they go, oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so it's usually the #1 question I get on this first page of the listing agreement. Broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers operating outside the MLS as per broker's policy. So keep in mind that cooperating is anybody who either belongs to the MLS for which you're listing the property or cooperating brokerages with that MLS. So for Barry's, that would be anybody that the Barry's Plus shows the properties to, right? Your Bay Area, your Metro list, right? So all those places. If somebody is a Southern California agent and they write an offer on one of your properties, you technically don't have to split the commission with them. They should submit a cooperating broker compensation form along with their offer to confirm the amount of compensation they're going to receive as part of the transaction. Same thing with you. If you're making an offer on a property for an MLS we don't belong to or don't have access to, you should be doing the same thing. Seller hereby irrevocably assigns broker the above compensation from seller's funds and proceeds from escrow. Broker may submit this agreement as instructions to compensate broker pursuant to paragraph 3A to any escrow regarding the property involving seller and a buyer, prospective buyer, or other transferee. So, right, so this is just our proof that the seller agreed to pay us compensation out of their funds to close escrow. So we can give this to the title and escrow company if necessary. Usually they don't ask for a copy of it.
Amy?
Yep.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
What was that? Because I've dealt with some other MLSs before. What was that cooperating MLS? What did you call that form?
Yeah, it's a cooperating broker compensation form. I believe it's CBC is the form. And it just outlines the amount of compensation you're expecting to receive from the transaction.
Okay. And so that's if you're dealing with somebody from like Central MLS or something like that, you always want to make sure you have who is it that's signing this when you these documents?
Yeah, so that one usually gets signed by the buyer's agent and submitted to the listing agent, and then the listing agent also signs it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to. So yeah, because somewhere on the other side needs to be signing that since they're the ones in the different. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. All right. Seller F is seller represents that seller has not previously entered into a listing agreement with another brokerage regarding the property unless specified as follows. So if there was a previous listing agreement, we need to note it there. The seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay. Sorry, there's a lot of animal noises outside. Seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities, right? So this was, hey, I previously had a listing agreement, and then, hold on, let me close this. Still loud because it's coming through the other window. All right. So that would be, hey, I had a previous listing agreement. Here's the list of names that the other broker provided me with. Remember up here in this section, I said, hey, if we cancel this and then you're going to sell it to one of those people, we would still be due a commission. Same thing would happen from them. So if they got a list of names, we would put that there. Okay. If property is sold to anyone listed above during the time the seller is obligated to compensate another broker, the broker is not entitled to compensation under this agreement, and the broker is not obligated to represent the seller in such transactions. So if one of those people made an offer on the property, we are not obligated to represent the seller in a transaction for which we're not getting paid. They could turn back to their previous broker to represent them in that transaction. Any questions on F? All right. 4 is items excluded and included. Unless otherwise specified in a real estate purchase agreement, all fixtures and fittings that are attached to the property are included, and personal property items are excluded from the purchase price. Additional items excluded or additional items included. This would be like, hey, yeah, we'd like to include that the fridge is going to be sold with the property, or hey, normally sheds go with the property, but we don't want this shed to go, so we're going to exclude the shed in the backyard. This is their time to mention that. It's a good time to do a walkthrough with your clients through their property and make sure you point out the things that should stay with the property and the things that might be gray areas and the things that should go, right? Like if there's garage cabinets, it's a good time to ask them, are those attached to the wall? Or are they freestanding? If there are decorative shelves on the wall, because those can sometimes be a gray area, it depends how they're attached to the wall, whether they should stay or go. Are you intending to take the decorative shelves with you, or would you like those to stay? Right? So it's always a good time to ask those questions, and there's never such thing as over clarification. So if we're walking through the property, there's a bunch of kind of gray item areas, I'm going to make a list of those things and say, hey, these things are included and these things are not included, just so that any potential buyers have record of what the seller would like to leave and what they would like to take with them. Okay, and you can do that on a separate list. It doesn't have to fit on those 2 lines right there. Seller intends that the above items be excluded or included in offering the property for sale, but understands that the purchase agreement supersedes any intention expressed above and will ultimately determine which items are excluded and included in the sale, and the broker is not responsible for, does not guarantee that the above exclusions or inclusions will be in the purchase agreement, right? So we have to make sure they're part of the RPA, not just the RLA. The RLA is just like a general reference point, but if it's not in that purchase agreement, it doesn't count. Okay, B is leased or liened or not owned items. The following items are leased or not owned by the seller. It has solar power system, alarm system, propane tank, water softener, and other, right? What do they pay a monthly fee for? Mark those. And these are liened items. So leased is something that, like an alarm system, like they install it, it's leased, it still belongs to the alarm company, but we pay a monthly service fee. And if I ever cancel service, they're going to come and take it away. Okay, that would be a leased item. We see that a lot of times with water softeners, propane tanks, right? We have liened items. Those are items that we own basically, but they have a loan on that item that they haven't paid in full. So it's probably they've probably recorded it against the title to the property. So the following items have been financed and a lien has been placed on the property to secure payment: solar power system, windows or doors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, or other. Other comes into play a lot of times here. People finance roofs, they finance repairs, improvements, room additions, and all those things get recorded against the title to the property. Seller will provide buyer, as part of the sales agreement, copies of lease documents and other documents obligating seller to pay for any such leased or liened item. Okay, super important because we have to provide those to potential buyers as well. Any questions on section 4, items included or excluded and leased or liened items? All right, section 5 is the MLS service. A is, what is an MLS? The MLS is a database of properties for sale that is available and disseminated to and accessible by all other real estate agents who are participants or subscribers to the MLS. As set forth in paragraph 7, participants and subscribers conducting public marketing of a property listing must submit the property information to the MLS. Property information submitted to the MLS describes the price, terms, and conditions under which the seller's property is offered for sale, including but not limited to the listing broker's offer of compensation to other brokers. It is likely that a significant number of real estate practitioners in any given area are participants or subscribers to the MLS. The MLS may also be part of a reciprocal agreement to which other MLS services belong. Real estate agents belong to other MLS services that have reciprocal agreements with the MLS, also have access to the information submitted to the MLS. The MLS may further transmit listing information to internet sites that post property listings online, right? There's what an MLS is. What information is provided to the MLS? All the terms of the transaction, including sales price and financing, and if applicable, will be provided to the MLS in which the property is listed for publication, disseminated and used by persons and entities on terms approved by the MLS, and may be provided to the MLS even if the property was not listed with the MLS. Seller consents to broker providing a copy of the listing agreement to the MLS if required by the MLS. What is broker's MLS? The broker is a participant subscriber to, and you're going to fill that in. Now keep in mind that we are participant subscribers to several different MLSs. So if you have a property that's listed, like if it's in Barry's, you're going to put Barry's. If it's in the Metro List service area, you would put Metro List. If it's in the Contra Costa, you would check and see if we belong to that MLS or what one around there, and you could put that one in there. Okay, so you want to make it as local as possible, assuming that we belong to that MLS. A good person to check with would probably be Carly. She would know, or Ed and Kara. The MLS and possibly others, right? So it's going to be, we're a subscriber to blank MLS and possibly others. That MLS is the primary MLS for the geographic area of the property. And if it is not, you're going to check the box is not the primary MLS for the geographic area of the property. When required by paragraph 7 or by the MLS, property will be listed with the MLS specified above. Any questions about section 5? All right, moving on to section 6, the benefits of using the MLS, the impact of opting out of the MLS. This is a bold box, which means it's an important box. People ask, do we have to have our clients initial this box? Yes, you do. Whether they're going into the MLS or opting out of it, they would still check this, or they would still initial this box.
Amy, can I ask another quick question? Sorry.
Absolutely. No, don't be sorry.
It's about the previous thing that we were just talking about, C.
Yeah.
What's the benefit? Because I've run into this a couple times now where there's been somebody from out of town on a different MLS that has a listing in Fairfield and it's listed on their MLS, not Barry's. It's like, what is the benefit to doing that? Because they're not even giving access to where the area is located. That's great for relocation, but that's going to really lessen your chances of selling it, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's really important to belong to the local MLS. Now, that being said, if we were listing a property in Winters, we would put it in through Barry's Plus. So it would disseminate the information to the MetroList listing service. However, it does show up as a Barry's listing, which would not be specific because we didn't log in the MetroList to put the listing in there, but it still disseminates all the information the same. So if it's, when you log into Barry's Plus, if it's one of those counties that's covered under not just Barry's, but Barry's Plus, then it really doesn't matter. But when we're talking about like outside of that, like if you're going to list something in Fresno, we don't belong to the Fresno MLS. I couldn't even tell you. I think that's like Central Valley or something. I can't even remember what it's called. So if we put it into Barry's, it's not going to show up in the local MLS. So that is of no benefit to the sellers. Absolutely. Like you really want to belong to the MLS in which you're listing properties.
Yeah, because these things show up on Zillow because Zillow doesn't discriminate MLSs, right?
Yep.
And so then you have clients going, I want to see this house. And I'm like, well, that's not coming up in my MLS. I don't know where you got that. And then you have to contact the listing agent who then has to give you all the information because you don't have access to their MLS. I just don't understand that way of thinking because I just don't see how that benefits their clients. So that's why maybe I was
missing. And their clients are signing this listing agreement probably that stipulates that, hey, we're going to put it in this MLS. It's not the primary MLS if they're disclosing all the information appropriately, and they're taking on that risk themselves for whatever reason. They're having a family member, whoever lists that property. Again, not advantageous on the part of the seller because it's not getting in front of the primary source of buyers for that area. So it puts them at a disadvantage, and us as agents, it makes it a little bit more difficult to show it. There are brokerages out there that don't even put their properties in the MLS. So, we don't see that as often as we were 2 or 3 years ago, but there was a company listing properties. They weren't putting it in the MLS. You had to go through and find it on Zillow and then find the contact information. It was kind of a pain. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, right. I just want to make sure it wasn't me and I wasn't missing something or, because it just didn't seem so. Yeah, but I know me and sometimes I miss the fine print. So I want to make sure I wasn't missing.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll have those agents that like, maybe I belong to the one in Fresno and I belong to Barry's and I put the listing into the local MLS there in Fresno. And I also, because I belong to Barry's, put it in here as an out of area listing so that it would show up to potential buyers in this area. Like there's an advantage to that because you're getting it in front of potentially more people, but not having it in the local MLS is a disadvantage, I would say, for any seller for sure. And that's why we're going to talk about the benefits of using the MLS or the impact of opting out of the MLS on Section 6. The exposure to buyers through the MLS. Listing property with an MLS exposes the seller's property to all real estate agents and brokers and their potential buyer clients who are participants or subscribers to the MLS or reciprocating MLS. The MLS may further transmit the MLS database to internet sites that post property listings online. The impact of opting out of the MLS. If seller elects to exclude the property from the MLS, seller understands and acknowledges that the seller is authorizing limited exposure of the property and no marketing or advertising of the property will occur. Real estate agents and brokers from other real estate offices and their buyer clients who have access to the MLS may not be aware of the seller's property, that the seller's property is offered for sale. Information about the seller's property will not be transmitted from the MLS to various real estate internet sites that are used by the public to search for property listings, and real estate agents, brokers, and members of the public may be unaware of the terms and conditions under which the seller is marketing the property. Reduction in exposure. Any reduction in exposure of the property may lower the number of offers and negatively impact the sales price. Not listing property in a local MLS. If the property is listed in an MLS which does not cover the geographic area for which the property is located, then real estate agents and brokers working that territory and buyers they represent looking for property in the neighborhood may not be aware this property is for sale. So, right, so that outlines it pretty solidly to a seller. They should understand the risks of either choosing to opt out of the MLS or choosing to not list it in a local MLS. Section 6. Any other questions about 5 or 6? 7 is public marketing of the property. Clear cooperation policy. The MLS rules require that residential real property with 1 to 4 units and vacant lot listings be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing. Keep in mind, we do require that the property, once a listing agreement is signed, does get submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing, except for Barry's. Barry's does not participate in the clear cooperation policy. It's a little funky. It's different. So if you're listing it in a Barry's specific county, that would be Solano, Sonoma, Napa, Marin, and Mendocino counties, then we're going to check this box. If the property is located outside of those counties, this box does not get checked, and that needs to be submitted. There's no public marketing of the property until it's ready to go on the MLS. Inside Barry's, we can do coming soon listings. Public marketing within clear cooperation. Okay, I have a question. Can anybody else hear my dog barking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not that bad.
Yeah.
It's not that bad?
No.
Okay, then I'll leave it alone.
I can still hear you over the dog.
All
Yeah.
right. It's bothering me, but I'll leave him if you guys can't hear it. All right. Public marketing within clear cooperation. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing, and public-facing websites, brokerage websites, displays, digital communication marketing, and email blast, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, marketing or to closed or private listing clubs or groups, and applications available to the general public. Public marketing does not include listing brokerage and one-to-one promotion between those licensees and their clients. So if it's not in the Barry service area, if it's in MetroList, if it's in the Bay Area, you can't market to the public. So anybody outside of our brokerage or their individual clients, unless it's going to be in the MLS within 24 hours. Okay, that means no web promotion. That means no coming soon flyers. That means no sign in the yard. Nothing like that should go happen if it's outside that Barry's. If it, again, inside Barry's, you're totally cool to promote it as much as you want to before it hits the MLS. Coming soon status impacts on marketing. Days on market DOM. Seller is advised to discuss the broker the meaning of coming soon, as that term applies to the MLS for which the property will be listed, and how any coming soon status will impact when and how a listing will be viewable to the public via the MLS. Seller authorizes broker to utilize coming soon status. If any, seller is further advised to discuss with broker how days on market calculations or similarly utilized tracking field works in the MLS for which the property is listed. So some of the MLSs may allow you to put it in as a coming soon listing. Most do not. If they participate in the clear cooperation policy, most do not have a coming soon listing because it needs to be available to be seen by the public when it goes into the MLS. Barry's allows coming soon status, so you can put it in as a coming soon there.
Amy, really quick on that.
Yeah.
The clear cooperation policy on 7A, it just says that it has to be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day. But it doesn't say how it has to be submitted. So you can, I would think, be able to submit it to the MLS as a coming soon because you're still submitting it within 1 business day, right? Or no?
If that MLS supports coming soon, yes. So if it is a property in Woodland that you're doing a listing for, they do not support coming soon. So it needs to be within 1 day of public marketing of the property. It needs to be in the MLS, viewable and available to people to see and show.
How effective do you think coming soons are?
Well,
Worth even trying to find out if the MLS you're dealing with allows coming soons, or do you even think coming soons are even effective enough to do them?
Okay, so the only MLS that allows coming soons ultimately is Barry's. That's in a nutshell. Anywhere around us, it's Barry's, and that's it. Coming soons are effective. You know, if you've got a listing, they're finishing up repairs or something, or they're finishing clearing out and getting the property ready so it really sparkles and shines. Being able to put your sign in the yard ahead of time, a couple weeks in advance, and put coming soon, or being able to send out coming soon flyers to potential buyer households, can be very effective. Being able to set it up so that you're coming on the market on like a Wednesday or Thursday versus coming on the market on like a Sunday, I would say super effective. Absolutely. I'm in favor of coming soons. Because like if I've got a property that's getting ready to come on the market and a potential buyer knew that property was getting ready to come on the market, they might hold off putting in an offer on one and settling for a property because one on the street they really want is getting ready to come on.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Again, it's only allowed inside of Barry's though, so just keep that in mind. So Solano, Solano, Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino, and Marin counties. Okay. Seller instructs broker. So if it is not going in the MLS within, I think it's like 3 days of the signed listing agreement. Okay, so this up here, A was it needs to go in the MLS within 1 day of public marketing, right? So public marketing, so I am shooting out a social media blast. It should be in the MLS the next day. That would be the top A. Down here on D is it should be in the MLS regardless of the clear cooperation policy within 3 days of a signed listing agreement. If it's not, we should have a SELM form and we should exclude it from the MLS until it's ready to go into the MLS. So seller instructs broker. MLS may require CAR form SELM or the local equivalent form. Seller instructs broker to market the property to the public and start marketing on the beginning date of this agreement or blank date. So the default is we're going to begin marketing it on this date up here, which means that for most MLSs, it needs to go in within 24 hours, within 1 day, because we're going to start marketing it immediately. For Barry's, that would just mean that we're going to start marketing it on that day, but it needs to be in the MLS within 3 days. So if it's not going to be in the MLS right away, then we're going to use CAR form SELM and we're going to put a date here. So let's say that today is the 9th of May, but we're not coming on the market until the 24th. We would just fill in the 24th there. And then we're also going to include that SELM form, the seller excluding from the multiple listing service. Okay. Option 2 is the seller instructs broker to not market the property to the public. Seller understands that no public marketing will occur and the scope of marketing that will occur consists only of direct one-on-one promotion between the brokers and licensees affiliated with the listing brokerage and their respective clients. So that would be option 2. So for the most part, we're going to check box number 1 and we're either going to say, hey, it's going on the MLS immediately, or we're preparing it for sale and here's where it's going to go live on the MLS and begin marketing to the public. This would be here. If you didn't know, like your seller's doing some repairs, they're not sure when it's going to go on the market, you can check this box number 2, and then we could always change it later on with a modification of terms. So once we get closer, we kind of know when the on market date is, we would do a modification of terms that just says seller instructs broker to market property to public beginning on X date.
Could you ever go to D1 and say that it's going to start marketing beginning date of agreement, or could you put in to be determined, or does it have to actually have a date?
It would need to have a date.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can always change that. So we could throw something in there. Oh, we think it's going to be ready in 3 weeks. And then as that 3-week mark is getting closer, we would just modify it with that modification of terms form. Super simple.
Okay.
Yep. Whether paragraph 7D1 or 7D2 is selected, seller understands and agrees that should any public marketing of the property occur, the property listing will be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day, right? Just restating that. F is clear cooperation policy does not apply. 7A, other than the language in the parentheses, 7B, D, and E do not apply. So if it's going into the Barry's, we just can check this box F. We would check this box does not require, and then check this box F, clear cooperation policy does not apply. Paragraph 7A, broker shall disclose to seller and obtain seller's consent for any instructions to not market the property in the MLS or to the public. So if clear cooperation policy doesn't apply, we still want to do that SELM form stating when we're going to begin marketing it to the public or when it's going to go into the MLS. Okay, that makes sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to 8, MLS data on the internet. MLS rules allow MLS data to be made available by the MLS to additional internet sites unless the broker gives the MLS instructions to the contrary. Specific information that can be excluded from the internet as permitted or in accordance with the MLS is as follows. The property or property address. Seller can instruct broker to have the MLS not display the property or property address on the internet. CAR form SELI. Seller understands that either of these opt-outs would mean consumers searching for listings on the internet may not see the property or property's address in response to their search. Keep in mind that if we don't have the internet pass through, or the address pass through to the internet rather, it's not going to show up on map searches anywhere, whether it's in the MLS, Zillow, anywhere, because the address is not out there. So most people, when they search properties, do map searches. When they're on Zillow, they're searching like properties in this area. And it won't show up. So just something to keep in mind. Feature opt-out. Seller can instruct broker to advise the MLS that the seller does not want visitors to MLS participant or subscriber websites or electronic displays that display the property listing to have features below. CAR form SELI. Seller understands that seller understands that these opt-outs may apply only to websites or electronic displays of MLS participants and subscribers who are real estate broker and agent members of the MLS, that other internet sites may or may not have the features set forth herein, and that neither broker nor the MLS have the ability to control or block such features on other internet sites. Comments and reviews, the ability to write comments or reviews about the property on those sites, or the ability to link another site containing such comments or reviews if the link is in immediate conjunction with the property display, right? So we can turn off comments and reviews on the MLS, which they don't exist, but we can't prevent people from commenting or reviewing it on other sites. The automated estimate of value, the ability to create an automated estimate of value to link to another site containing such estimate of value if the link is immediate conjunction with the property display. So you could, right? So like we can't cause Zillow to not post their Zestimate. Seller elects to opt out of certain internet features as provided for CAR form SELI. So if they wanted to opt out of either of these things, we would just check this box here. Again, it doesn't do them hardly any good because we can't control the other sites that are probably going to post that stuff anyways. Seller representations. The seller represents that unless otherwise specified in writing, seller is unaware of any notice of default recorded against the property and any delinquent amounts due under any loan secured by or any obligation affecting the property, any bankruptcy, insolvency, or similar proceedings affecting the property, any litigation, arbitration, administrative action, government investigation, or other pending or threatened action that affects or may affect the property or seller's ability to transfer it, and any current, pending, or proposed special assessments affecting the property. Seller shall promptly notify broker in writing if seller becomes aware of any of these items during the listing period or extension thereof. Any questions there on 8 or 9? All right, moving on to 10. Broker and seller's duties. Broker responsibility, authority, and limitations. The broker agrees to exercise reasonable effort and due diligence to achieve the purpose under this agreement. Unless seller gives broker written instructions to the contrary, broker is authorized but not required to order reports and disclosures, including those specified in 10E as necessary. Advertise and market the property by any method in any medium selected by the broker, including MLS and the internet, and to the extent permitted by these media, control the dissemination of the information submitted to any medium, and disclose to any real estate licensee making an inquiry of the receipt of offers on the property and the offering price of such offers. See right here in section 10A, just so you know, it's giving everybody permission to disclose the information for offers already received. Just throwing that out there in case somebody says, well, I can't do that. Well, you probably can in 10A. You probably didn't say you couldn't. All right, presentation of offers. Broker agrees to present all offers received for the seller's property and present them as to the seller as soon as possible, unless seller gives broker written instructions to the contrary. So if we're going to put the property on the market on Wednesday and we don't want to review offers until next Tuesday, please put that in your listing agreement or on a modification of terms when the review is going to happen, so that when you put that into the MLS, that all offers received will begin being reviewed on Tuesday, that you have written instructions from the seller as to that information. Okay, because right here it says otherwise we have to present all offers as soon as possible. Buyer supplemental offer letters, buyer letters. Paragraph 8 of the Fair Housing Discrimination Advisory attached to this agreement informs the seller of the practice of many buyers and their agents, including a buyer letter with an offer to try to influence the seller to accept the buyer's offer, tug on those heartstrings. Buyer letters may include photos and video, whether overt or unintentional. Buyer letters may contain information about the buyer or seller's protected class or characteristics. Deciding whether to accept an offer based upon a protected classes or characteristics is unlawful. Broker will not review the content of buyer letters. And then it defaults to seller instructs broker to not present buyer letters, whether submitted with an offer or separately at a different time. Seller authorizes broker to specify in the MLS that buyer letters will not be presented to seller. So please put that in your MLS listings. No buyer letters will be presented, right? Hopefully to avoid them submitting them at all. That's the default. So the default is number 1, I'm not going to look at them. And the default number 2 is I'm not going to present them to you, seller. Seller instructs broker to present all buyer letters. That would be B. So if the seller wants those letters, they want to take on that risk of discrimination, we would check that box there. Broker advises seller that buyer letters may contain information about protected classes or characteristics, and such information should not be used in the seller's decision of whether to accept, reject, or counter a buyer's offer. And if seller relies on buyer's letter, seller is acting against the broker's advice and should seek the advice of counsel before doing so. Okay, that's C. D is seller agrees to consider offers presented by broker and to act in good faith to accomplish the sale of the property by, among other things, making the property available for showing at reasonable times, and subject to paragraph 3F, referring to broker all inquiries of any interested parties in the property. Seller is responsible for determining at what price to list and sell the property. Okay, and E is investigation and reports. Seller agrees that within 5 days is the default. You can change it to more or less of the beginning date of this agreement to order, when required by service provider, pay for a natural hazard disclosure report and the following reports, right? So it's saying right here, like, hey, seller, you're going to pay for the NHD report, right? And the following, you could check any of these boxes: structural past, general property, homeowners association documents, preliminary title report, roof inspection, pool inspection, septic inspection, and other maybe like professional photos, right? So you might check that box for other and put that in there. And we may want like a general property inspections, right? So whatever we're going to have done on the property, if we're going to open pre-escrow, click that preliminary title report. We're going to have the natural hazard zone. We're going to have a general home inspection, and then photography, I'd put other. If the property is in a common interest development or homeowners association, sellers advise there may be benefits to obtaining required documents prior to entering into escrow. Oh, if it's in an HOA, check that little box there for HOA documents so you can get those in advance. Prior to entering into escrow with buyer. Such benefits may include, but not limited to, potentially being able to lower costs in obtaining the documents and avoiding any potential delays or complications due to late or slow delivery of such documents, right? So we wanted to order those ahead of time. So we would check the box here for that, and the preliminary title report and a general property inspection. And then other, I'm going to put here professional photographers. There we go. Okay. Seller further agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold broker harmless for all claims, disputes, litigation, judgments, attorney fees, and costs arising for any incorrect or incomplete information supplied by the seller, or from any material facts that the seller knows but fails to disclose, including dangerous or hidden conditions on the property. Any questions about section 10? All right, moving right along to section 11, deposit. Broker is authorized to accept and hold on seller's behalf any deposits to be applied towards the purchase price. Just putting that in there, just so you know, we don't generally take deposits. They go straight to the title company, and I recommend that you just let them go straight to the title company instead of you holding them. In other states, the brokerages do hold the deposits. 12 is agency relationships. Disclosure. Seller acknowledges receipt of the disclosure regarding agency relationships. That's at CAR Form AD at the very beginning. Seller representation. Broker shall represent the seller in any resulting transaction except as specified in paragraph 3F. That was when they disclosed that they were involved in a previous listing agreement and which buyers would not count. Possible dual agency with buyer. Depending on the circumstances, it may be necessary or appropriate for the broker to act as an agent for both the seller and the buyer. Exchange party or one or more additional parties. Buyer. Broker shall, as soon as practicable, disclose to seller any election to act as a dual agent representing both the seller and the buyer. If a buyer is procured directly by broker or an agent licensee, associate licensee in broker's firm, seller hereby consents to broker acting as a dual agent for seller and buyer. In the event of an exchange, seller hereby consents to broker collecting compensation from additional parties for services rendered, providing there is disclosure to all parties of such agency and compensation. Seller understands and agrees that a dual agent may not, without express permission to respective party, disclose to the other party confidential information, including but not limited to the facts relating to either buyer or seller's financial position, motives, bargaining position, or other personal information that may impact the price, including with the seller's willingness to accept a price less than the listing price or the buyer's willingness to pay a price greater than the price offered, and except set forth above. Dual agent is obligated to disclose known facts materially affecting the value or desirability of the property to both parties. Confirmation. Broker shall confirm the agency relationship described above or as modified in writing prior to or concurrent with the seller's execution of the purchase agreement. Potentially competing, that's done just so everybody knows on the RPA. It discloses at the very top of the RPA who's representing whom. Potentially competing sellers and buyers. Seller understands that broker may have or obtain listings on other properties, and the potential buyers may consider, make offers on, or purchase through broker property the same as or similar to seller's property. Seller consents to broker's representation of sellers and buyers of other properties before, during, and after the end of this agreement. Seller acknowledges the receipt of the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure, and consent. That PRBS that was also at the beginning of this form. Termination of agency relationship. Seller acknowledges and agrees that representation duties of an agency relationship with broker terminate at the expiration of this agreement, or if it occurs first, the completion of any transaction specified in this agreement. Section 13 is security, insurance, showings, and audio video. The broker is not responsible for the loss or damage of personal or real property or person, whether attributable to the use of a key safe lockbox, a showing of the property, or otherwise. Third parties, including but not limited to appraisers, inspectors, brokers, and prospective buyers, may all have access and take videos and photographs of the interior of the property. Seller agrees to take reasonable precautions to safeguard and protect valuables that might be accessible during showings of the properties, to obtain insurance to protect against these risks. Broker does not maintain insurance to protect the seller's person. The seller. Persons visiting the property may not be aware that they could be recorded by audio or visual devices installed by the seller, such as nanny cams or hidden security cameras. Seller is advised to post a notice disclosing the existence of security devices. I highly recommend that you provide that to each and every seller that you have, because somebody always has something in their house that will record, whether it's a Ring doorbell, an Alexa device, something to that effect. So just make some nice little laminated cards to go on the front door or right inside the entryway. Photographs and internet advertising. In order to effectively market the property for sale, it is often necessary to provide photographs, virtual tours, and other media to buyers. Seller agrees that broker and others may photograph or otherwise electronically capture images of the exterior and interior of the property. Images for static and or virtual tours of the property by buyers and others used on broker's website, the MLS, and other marketing materials and sites. Keep in mind that it defaults to they agree. If they don't agree to photography, then we would check the box here, does not agree. Seller acknowledges that if a broker engages in third parties to capture and or reproduce those display images, the agreement between the broker and those third parties may provide such use of the images. If seller is concerned, seller should request that broker provide any third-party agreement impacting the images. Seller also acknowledges that once images are placed on the internet, neither the broker nor the seller have control over who can view such images and what viewers may make of the images, or how long such images may remain available on the internet. Seller further assigns any rights to all images to the broker/agent and agrees that such images are the property of broker agent, and the broker agent may use such images for advertising, including post-sale and for broker agent's business in the future, right? We have the right to use these photographs forever. Seller acknowledges that prospective buyers and other persons coming into the property may take photographs, videos, or other images of the property. Seller understands that the broker does not have the ability to control or block the taking and use of images by any such persons. If checked, The seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS. Taking of images is limited to those persons preparing appraisals or inspection reports. Seller acknowledges that unauthorized persons may take images who do not have access or do not read the limiting instructions in the MLS, or who take images regardless of any limiting instructions in the MLS. Once images are taken and or put into electronic display on the internet or otherwise, neither broker nor seller has control over who views such images or what viewers may make of the images. So the default isn't that. The default is, hey, whoever can take pictures when they come. If the buyers want to take pictures, that's fine. If that makes the seller uneasy, we can check this box here that, hey, we'll put instructions in the MLS that nobody's to take additional photos of the property, except if you're an appraiser or an inspector, but ultimately we can't control that. Any questions about 12, 13, or 14? All right, moving right along to 15, the key safe lockbox. A key safe lockbox is designed to hold a key to the property and permit access to the property by broker, cooperating brokers, MLS participants, their authorized licensees and representatives, authorized inspectors, and accompanied prospective buyers. Seller further agrees that broker at broker's discretion and without further approval from seller shall have the right to grant access to and conveys seller consent to access the property to inspectors, appraisers, workers, repair persons, and other persons requiring entry to the property in order to facilitate the sale of the property. Broker, cooperating brokers, MLS, and associations, boards of realtors are not insurers against injury, theft, loss, vandalism, or damage attributed to the use of a key safe lockbox. The seller does authorize broker to install a key safe lockbox is the default there on 15A. If we check the box, they do not authorize a key safe lockbox. Keep in mind, if they don't authorize a lockbox, either you're going to have to provide access to everybody who wants access, or they are, neither of which is a win-win scenario. So keep that in mind. It's kind of inconvenient to have to show up at every showing to let people in. And we absolutely do not want our sellers interacting with all potential buyers that come to the property. That is a bad situation. Tenant occupied property. If a seller does not occupy the property, seller shall be responsible for obtaining occupant's written permission for the use of a key safe lockbox, CAR form KLA. So if there's a tenant on the property, you need KLA. Just says that the tenant gives you permission to use a lockbox. Keep in mind, if it's tenant occupied, you're going to need 24-hour notice for any showings of that property per their contract. Signs, the seller does authorize broker to install a for sale sold sign on the property. If you check the box, they do not. Okay, remember, a sign in that property, somebody that can see that sign is going to sell their property. So a sign is for lead generation purposes. We really want it in the yard. Equal housing opportunity. We don't tell sellers that, though. We tell sellers that the sign may help sell their property, that prospective people walking through that neighborhood, driving through that neighborhood may see the sign and like that neighborhood and want to buy a home there. So they may call you and want to buy their home so that it's a good way to get their house sold. That's what we would tell our sellers. Equal housing opportunity. The property is offered in compliance with federal, state, local anti-discrimination laws. Attorney fees in any action, proceeding, or arbitration between seller and broker arising out of this agreement. Seller and broker are each responsible for paying their own attorney's fees and costs, except as otherwise specified in paragraph 22A. Additional terms, if it's a bank-owned property, you'd have the REO advisory, the short sale information advisory. If it was a short sale, if it's held in a trust, we would have the trust advisory. Seller intends to include a contingency for the purchase of replacement property as any resulting transaction would be this box here. So that would be SPRP, the seller purchase of replacement property. And on 19 is where I might put something like listing agent will pay the cost of any photos and or pre-listing LISTING inspections unless property does not sell for any reason, then seller agrees. I can't spell today. To pay for any such items. Again, I could save that as a clause under my templates, and then it'd make it really easy just to click on clause and auto-populate it in there, or set it up on my templates so that it auto-populates automatically. But that would be oftentimes for my sellers, I pay the cost of those pre-listing inspections and the photography for them. Just comes out of my commission. Oftentimes I negotiate like a 6% commission, and then I give 2.5% to the other agent. So I get 3.5%, which is covering those additional fees and costs that I'm going to incur for marketing and photos and inspections of the property. So I always want to put something in there that if the seller cancels it, right, for any reason, we don't sell this property, that the seller is going to take on payment of those items. 20 is management approval. If the associate licensee and broker's office, salesperson, or broker associate enters into this agreement on broker's behalf and broker manager does not approve of terms, broker manager has the right to cancel this agreement in writing within 5 days after its execution. Super important. Once this is signed, it should go into SkySlope within 24 hours of signatures. That way it can be reviewed by the broker or manager, and it can either be agreed to or it could be canceled. Okay. If you don't put it in until the end of the transaction, it makes it really hard for anybody to agree to this. Successors and assigns. The agreement shall be binding upon seller and seller's successors and assigns. Any questions on 15 through 21?
Yeah, really quick.
Yep.
What if you pay all of those things in advance? And the listing agreement expires?
We usually have a conversation about that prior to the listing agreement expiring. And I've yet to have one get to the expiration period, where the seller didn't know they were going to have to pay those costs because they were refusing to do price adjustments or something to that effect. But there's always that potential that you could eat it. However, if you do have this in the listing agreement, you could take them to small claims court to get your money back if you really wanted to.
So I was wondering if that applied, because I actually had this exact situation where they refused to list the house where it needed to be listed in order to actually get it sold. And so it literally, we expired a couple of times on the listing agreement, and I had to keep having them sign a new, modify it with a new expiration date and all that kind of stuff. But if they decided they wanted to just let it ride it out and not cancel, but just let it expire, I could be on the hook for paying those things without being reimbursed, correct?
Absolutely. Again,
Okay.
you can take it to small claims court. And that being said, you could always be on the hook for those fees and costs, but it's in the contract. So we put it in there to try to protect ourselves, but there's always a case that they refuse to take care of those items.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to check on that.
Always.
Hey, Amy, quick question on that too. On listing pre-inspections, what are some of the things that you do for like a pre-listing inspection?
Yeah, so I usually encourage a pre-listing inspection of a whole house inspection and a pest inspection. Pest inspection, because we're in an area that's so heavy in VA buyers that we want to make sure we have that done. So, because they're going to either ask for that Form 33 or the Section 1 and potentially 2 pest repairs to be completed. So I want to know what that's going to be up front if we're going to run into any issues. And a general home inspection, because it's going to give you that general health report. I'm trying to eliminate surprises as part of a purchase process. So if we have those inspections done ahead of time, it doesn't prevent the buyers from doing their own, but we're pretty confident in what they're going to find in their inspections, so that some of those small items can be taken care of, maybe even before we hit the market. And it's eliminating surprises that, oh yeah, we knew that the dishwasher drain wasn't working appropriately and the buyers were probably going to ask for that to be repaired, like no big deal type thing.
Would that include like a chimney inspection too, you think?
I usually don't go as in-depth as like an HVAC, chimney, or roof inspection unless I feel like it's necessary for the property.
Got it.
Yeah. If I thought there was going to be issues with the chimney, then I might go ahead and have that chimney inspection done. But otherwise, chimney, pool, HVAC, I would let the buyers foot the bill for that one.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Mediation. Seller and broker agree to mediate any dispute or claim arising between them under this agreement. So, Jennifer, to answer your question, if they didn't pay those fees, we would then go to mediation. That would be the next step before you went to small claims. I mean, you could still go, but mediation to try to work that out and be like, hey, you signed that you would pay this. It's expired. We talked about the fact that the property was listed too high. Once you pay for those photos, I'm happy to turn over all the files to you so that you own them. So if anytime you decide to list that property in the future, you have access to those photos, right? So it behooves them to pay. Seller and broker agreed. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just saying, okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, seller and broker agree to mediate any dispute arising from this agreement before resorting to any arbitration or court action. Mediation fees, if any, shall be divided equally among the parties involved. If for any dispute or claim for which this paragraph applies, any non-party, the non-mediating party, commences an action without first attempting to resolve the matter through mediation, or before commencement of an action refuses to mediate after the request has been made, then the non-mediating party is the losing party, and the non-mediating party is the losing party in any such action. The prevailing party in such action shall be entitled to recover attorney's fees from the non-mediating party, notwithstanding the terms in paragraph 18. Exclusions from this mediation agreement are specified in 22B. 22B, the following matters shall be excluded from mediation: judicial or non-judicial foreclosure, or any action proceeding to enforce a deed of trust, mortgage, or installment land contract as defined in Civil Code 2985, an unlawful detainer action, the filing or enforcement of a mechanics lien, and any matter that is within the jurisdiction of a probate, small claims, or bankruptcy court. The filing of a court action to enable the recording of a notice of pending action for order of attachment, receivership, injunction, or other provisional remedies that shall not constitute a waiver or violation of the mediation provisions. Arbitration advisory, if a seller and a broker desire to resolve disputes arising between them through arbitration rather than court, they can document their agreement by attaching and signing an arbitration agreement form, ARB. Okay, so it should always go to mediation before you go to court action, unless there's like a foreclosure or mechanics lien or something being filed against the property. 23, entire agreement. All prior discussions, negotiations, and agreements between the party concerning the subject matter of this agreement are superseded by this agreement, which constitutes the entire contract and a complete, exclusive expression of their agreement, and may not be contradicted by evidence of any prior agreement or contemporaneous oral agreement. If any provision of this agreement is to be held ineffective or invalid, the remaining provisions will nevertheless be given full force and effect. This agreement and any supplement, addendum, or modification, including any photocopy or facsimile, may be executed in counterparts, meaning the sellers could sign one copy and I could sign the exact copy of the same thing, and it counts as us signing the document incomplete. Let's see, ownership, title, and authority. Seller warrants that the seller is the owner of the property. No other persons or entities have title to the property, and the seller has the authority to both execute this agreement and sell the property. Exclusions to ownership, title, and authority are as follows. We'd write anything down there. Legally authorized signer, wherever the signature initials of the legally authorized signer identified in the signature block below appear on this agreement or any related documents, it shall be deemed in a representative capacity for the entity described and not in an individual capacity unless otherwise indicated. The legally authorized signer represents that the entity for which that person is acting already exists and is in good standing to do business in California, and shall deliver to a broker within 3 days after execution of this agreement evidence of authority to act in that capacity, such as, but not limited to, the applicable portion of the trust, certificate of trust, letters of testamentary, court order, power of attorney, corporate resolution, or formation documents of the business entity. By citing below, the seller acknowledges that the seller has read, understand, and received a copy and agrees to the terms of this agreement. If it's an entity seller, we're going to check the next box. That would be our corporations, our trusts, probate, whatever that might be. We would check this box here. You'd put the name of the legally authorized signer here on line 3. And if it's a trust or probate or whatever, we would include the name of the trust here on line 4, or the probate case number there on line 4. And then the seller would sign it. Sign, and then you would also sign it down here. Now, if there were more than 2 sellers, we would attach what we call the ASA form, or the additional signature addendum, for seller 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Any questions about that last couple sections of the RLA? All right. In addition to the RLA and the documents that you found at the beginning, the first 6 pages, there are 2 more pages of documents at the end. One is the seller's advisory, just talking about how to sell the property. This is a pretty good form. I highly recommend reading through this form. It does talk about their general disclosure duties, their statutory disclosures, what should be provided to the buyers, death and other disclosures, right? Condominium and common interest subdivisions, contractual terms, legal requirements, withholding taxes. Keep in mind that it doesn't auto-populate the date on page 2 of the seller's advisory. So you want to make sure to always come down and put that date in on that second page of the seller's advisory. Marketing considerations, right? Pre-sale inspection considerations. People are not aware of defects or problems on their own property. One way to make yourself aware is to obtain professional inspections prior to sale. Pre-sale inspections may include a general property inspection, inspection for wood destroying pests and organisms, structural pest control, and an inspection of the septic or well services, if any, among others, right? By doing this, you have the opportunity to make repairs before your property is sold, which may enhance the marketability, right? And helps with disclosure. So it kind of goes over that right there. And then they sign that page there on number 2. And then you have your California Consumer Privacy Act advisory, just stating that we can't control the information that gets published online, or there's certain information about the sale of the house that will continue to exist after the sale of the property. Any questions about the seller's advisory or the California Consumer Privacy Act advisory, disclosure, and notice?
Just out of curiosity, on the death and other disclosures section,
Yes.
as long as the death occurred more than 3 years prior, you don't have to actually include that. However, I mean, usually it's a pretty good idea to do it anyway, just to cover your bases. But are you required to disclose how the manner in which they died, or is that actually considered a privacy issue?
So yeah, so for the most part, yes, except when it's health related, you don't have to disclose specific health. So it'll ask for the deaths on property on the SPQ, the seller property questionnaire. If there's many deaths, and you're correct, it's within 3 years of the sale, which it outlines here. It doesn't ask for the cause of death. However, a buyer can ask for that. And you would just say health-related reasons is how you would phrase that, because we don't want to violate HIPAA rules. But if somebody was murdered, or it was a what's it called when you kill yourself? Why can't I come up with a name right now? Suicide. Thank you. Then yeah, you could actually disclose that, oh, it was a death by suicide, or death by murder, or whatever it might be. And it does not have to be disclosed if it was more than 3 years prior. The only time that I would recommend, to your point, Jennifer, about if it was more than 3 years, is if it was a highly publicized death in that property, then you probably want to disclose it years later.
Can that come back to bite you? Like, because some buyers feel that, how somebody died in the property leaves bad juju, and all this kind of stuff. And so is that something that can come back and bite you later if you don't disclose how they died, especially if it was in a violent nature? Are you required to disclose if it was a violent nature death?
Only if asked.
No,
So
only if asked. Okay.
Only if asked. So you're required to disclose the death if it was 3 years or less, and the manner of death only if specifically asked. And again, if it was a highly publicized death in that property, I would probably choose to disclose that 5, 6, 7 years down the road, just so people were made aware. And yeah, the manner of death only has to be disclosed if you're specifically asked.
Okay, because I've run into that actually a couple of times, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm walking a fine line here, what I'm disclosing or what I'm not disclosing. So I wanted to kind of solidify the rules of all of that.
Yeah. Cool. I think that just about covers everything inside that residential listing agreement. If you guys have any questions, feel free to always reach out to me and ask me more specific questions. In addition, just so everybody knows, in addition to the listing agreement, when I send a listing agreement out for signatures, I also include the market conditions advisory, or the MCA, which just talks about the fact that the market is cyclical and there's ups and downs, and the seller should be aware of the type of market we're in. And ultimately, it's the seller's choice of what they decide to list the property for sale at. Hold on, I was just trying to find my California Association of Realtors forms. So that would be the MCA. In addition to the MCA, I usually include the SBSA, which is the statewide buyer and seller advisory. It's a really long document that talks about all the different types of investigation a buyer can do on the property. Also talks about the seller's duties and the agent's duties. So I like that one. I usually include the wildfire WFDA, which is the wildfire disaster advisory, just talking about the fact that we live in an area where there's wildfires and they should investigate the cost of insurance and whether the property is insurable or not. This isn't the home fire hardening one where it's required for high fire hazard severity zones and properties built before 2010. This is just a general one, so I usually include that. I usually go ahead and have them sign the water heater smoke detector, the WHSD, with the listing agreement, just stating that the water heater needs to be double strapped and smoke detectors provided, as well as the carbon monoxide. Let's see, it's water conserving plumbing fixtures and carbon monoxide disclosure, that one as well. Let's think about what else. I usually include the county disclosure if there is one. So like the Solano County real estate disclosure and advisory, I include that one as well. The seller property questionnaire, the transfer disclosure statement or the exempt seller disclosure, as well as the earthquake hazard disclosure and the lead-based paint. Earthquake hazards required for properties built before 1965, and and lead-based paint is required for properties built before 1978. Those I usually send out through Glide because the seller has to actually answer questions regarding those forms. So I send those out through Glide, but anything that doesn't require questions that I'm going to need for my disclosures, I include as part of the listing agreement. For the most part, unless I'm having them sign it in their home, then I just have the listing agreement with it and the other 20 documents that are attached to the listing agreement. But I think other than that, this just about covers what I include. So that market conditions advisory. Oh, I know which other one. I also include the DIA for it's the disclosure information advisory. There we go. So I include that disclosure information advisory, which goes over in very simple terms what the seller's responsibility is as far as disclosure. One of my favorite lines in this form here is just says that if you're wondering whether you should or shouldn't disclose something, you probably should, right? So it just covers it in very simple terms like that of what should be disclosed. So that's kind of my list there. Again, I would also include, so I would include the residential listing agreement, the market conditions advisory, the statewide buyer and seller advisory, wildfire disaster advisory, water heater and smoke detector statement of compliance, water conserving plumbing fixtures and carbon monoxide detector notice, disclosure information advisory, and any county or city disclosures that should be included based on the location of the property.
Do you know what the letters are for the water conserving plumbing fixtures, carbon monoxide notice?
WCMD.
WCMD. Okay, it makes it faster. I can just look them up later.
It does.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we wrap up today?
Hey, I just have a real quick one.
Yeah.
Seller's contingent on selling
Yep.
based on replacement property. Other than private remarks, is there another place to flag that?
There is not another place to flag that. You would just put it in the public remarks that the sale of this property is contingent on the buyer's finding a replacement property. And then I usually go ahead and fill out that SPRP. I pre-fill it out and I include it with my disclosures so that it gets filled out how I want it filled out for my sellers. And then that's already included. So all they have to do is sign it instead of worry about how to fill that out appropriately.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
That was a lot of reading today.
It's a lot. I wasn't sure I was going to make it at first. I kept coughing. I got it under control.
Your chops are going to be sore after this one.
Maybe. The good news is I get tomorrow off. So I get a free day tomorrow. Make sure you log your attendance. The link is in the chat box. And as always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. I'm happy to answer questions.
Great.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Have a good day. Enjoy the office meeting tomorrow.
Will
Thanks.
do.
Alrighty.